my lady of commitment, Ruth. Ruth is a short version of the Hebrew word Ruth, which means lovely friend. Naomi was an Israelite woman who during a famine had gone with her family to live in the country of Moab. When her husband and 2 sons died, she decided to return to her hometown, Bethlehem. She had 2 daughters-in-law, one of whom was Ruth. All 3 were widows. The death of their husbands left those 3 women at the mercy of a predatory society. Unlike women in today's society, they could not seek a widow's share or a year's support of their husband's estates. They had to find a refuge or starve. With a husband, Ruth's life was more or less in balance. With the death of these 3 men, the balance was upset. To complicate things, Ruth and the other daughter-in-law were Moabite women, not Israelites. The Moabite people were traditional enemies of the Israelites. There was frequent warfare between the 2 groups. According to the Israelites' belief, Moabites came from the active incest between Lot and his older daughter, and so the whole nation was tainted and inferior. Naomi assumed her daughters-in-law would not want to return to Bethlehem, even though the women respected and loved each other. Ruth could not be persuaded to return to her people and the Moabite way of life, even though the other daughter-in-law did return to her people. Ruth had shared loneliness, anxiety, and grief with Naomi, and now that the older woman was completely alone, Ruth would stand by her and return to Bethlehem. At this point in the story, Ruth gives her famous speech of loyalty to her mother-in-law. It's found in Ruth 1:16-17. But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or turn back from following you. Where I go, where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people. Your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There I will be buried. May the Lord do thus, and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." This is one of the most beautiful statements of commitment in Scripture. Perhaps the most beautiful in all literature, and well deserving the place it receives in many wedding ceremonies. So Naomi and Ruth returned to Bethlehem in time for the autumn harvest of barley. Although Naomi was destitute, she had good family connections, and both she and Ruth were women of initiative. They didn't believe in sitting down and letting events simply happen. Both women took an active part in all stages of food production. Ruth decided she would help to glean the barley in the fields to feed herself and Naomi and to store grain for the winter. Gleaning was a common practice in ancient Israel. It was a form of charity for the disadvantaged in society. Recognized groups of the poor, such as widows, orphans, and foreigners, could walk behind the harvesters, picking up what was left. This is what Ruth did. It was while gleaning in the fields that Ruth met Boaz. Ruth 2:1-7 tells us how this meeting came about. Now Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain, behind someone in whose sight I must find favor." She said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she went. She came and gleaned in the field behind the reapers. As it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz. Just then, Boaz came from Bethlehem. Notice the phrase in Ruth 2:3 that says, "As it happened." Ruth went to the field of Naomi's rich relative Boaz. This phrase is often used in the Bible to suggest that God is setting the scene for something significant. It is also implied with a touch of Jewish humor that Naomi and the people of Bethlehem saw a good match for Ruth and edged her into meeting Boaz. Naomi knew that Ruth was beautiful and respected, and she knew that a rich husband for Ruth would solve all their problems. Boaz was the ideal choice. He was available, childless, well-respected, and rich. He was also a relative of Naomi's through her husband's family. so he had a legal obligation to help Naomi. In Naomi's and therefore Ruth's family, Boaz was second in line to the position of Goel. In English, the word Goel is often translated as nearest kin, but in ancient Judah, it meant much more than that. A Goel was a close male relative with the duty of looking after a family when the male head of the family was absent. In earlier times, the Goel of the family was expected to marry the widow of an Israelite man, if she wished. Ruth, who may not have understood the niceties of Israel law, called Boaz Goel. By great good luck, Boaz seems to have smitten from the outset. He went to great lengths to get extra grain for Ruth, to protect her from the young men who might harass her, and to see that she was properly fed. Ruth 2:14 says, "At mealtime, Boaz said to her, 'Come here and eat some of this bread, and dip your morsel in sour wine.' So she sat beside the reapers, and he heaped up for her some parched grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over." The point of the story is that it was just not luck or love, but God had nudged them into their destiny. The story moves to the time of year when the harvest had been brought in and the weather was still warm. Love was in the air. Naomi was a shrewd older woman who had seen a lot of life, and she now devised a plan to prod Boaz into marrying Ruth. She knew men, and she gave Ruth specific instructions on everything she must do. Fortunately, Ruth had good sense to heed the older woman. She perfumed herself, dressed in her most becoming clothes, and waited until Boaz had eaten a good meal. Both women knew a man with a full stomach was easier to handle. When Boaz finally lay down to sleep, Ruth approached him where he lay on the threshing floor. Someone always slept there at night until the grain was removed, to guard against thieves. Ruth approached him stealthily and lay down next to him. While lying beside Boaz, Ruth suggested that he, as the Goel of Naomi's family, should cover her with his blanket, a euphemism for marriage. She had the right to demand marriage of the Goel of her family, so that she could have the children that Israelite women longed for. Boaz happily agreed, but pointed out that there was another man who had that right, a closer relative even than himself. Boaz had to square matters with him before he could marry Ruth. He seems to have been at pains to do everything correctly, so that there could be no question about the legality of the marriage. Ruth stayed beside Boaz until morning, stealing away before first light to return to Naomi, who pounced on her and demanded to know how things had gone and whether the plan had worked. Was Ruth to be married or single? The two women waited impatiently to see how events would unfold. The villagers were well aware of what was happening, as people in small towns usually do. When Boaz went next morning to the meeting place at the gate of the town, he was met almost immediately by the official Goel of Naomi's family, and probably by a good many interested onlookers as well. Some complicated negotiations went on regarding a good parcel of land that Naomi either owned outright or had put up for sale at some previous time. But this was just a formality. The outcome of the story was never in doubt. Ruth 4:13-15 confirms. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin. May his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be your restorer of life and nourishment for your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him." Ruth and Boaz's son's name was Obed. Eventually, Ruth would be the great-grandmother of King David. Ruth had special significance in Christians as the genealogy of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew lists 4 women, and Ruth was one of them. Ruth is a great story that guides us in 3 important areas. First, it teaches us about friendship. Ruth was poor and a foreigner, but she listened to the advice of an older, wiser woman. In turn, Naomi was rewarded by Ruth's unfaltering loyalty. The message here is courage and ingenuity triumph over misfortune. Second, it teaches about family. Ruth's story celebrates the family and the way it continues through many generations. Ruth, a childless widow at the beginning of the story, became the great-grandmother of Israel's great King David. Third, it tells something of God's plan. The story of Naomi's family and the way it endured is a universal theme. Even Ruth, a foreigner from the despised Moabites, could move God's plan towards fulfillment. You and I love to overcrowd our lives. As a result, God's truth often doesn't get a chance to blossom in our lives. To fulfill God's destiny for your life, you likely don't have to do more, but have to do less. This brings me to my third point, Martha of Bethany. Martha was a dedicated servant who lived with her sister Mary and her brother Lazarus in Bethany. All three were friends of Jesus, who earlier had raised Lazarus from the dead. One day, they invited Jesus over for dinner. Mary spent her evening listening to Jesus and anointed his feet with expensive perfume and wiped it with her hair. Martha, on the other hand, was busy being a hostess and worried about the food and whether everything was in its place. Martha got upset because of all the work she had to do while her sister got to sit with Jesus. That's when Jesus said to her, "Dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There's only one thing I'm concerned about. Mary had discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. When your life is over, only one thing will really matter. Did you get to know the Son of God? All those things that we're able to buy because of your long hours at the office won't matter. All the time you spent obsessing over sporting events or social functions or preparing the perfect holiday meal won't matter either. But whether you spend your time to getting to know Jesus will matter for ages and ages to come. So enjoy life, but don't let your life pass without spending some time with Jesus. Long after everything else fades, worshiping Jesus is all that will truly last." Another great woman of the Bible, Deborah.